Hello and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we'll continue reading Red Planet by Robert Heinlein. Our heroes have got a new schoolmaster and they're finding that he's not very amiable. They decided to take a quick look at the bulletin board before they got into any more trouble rather than fix the masks at once. They went to the entrance foyer and did so. On the board was pinned, "Notice to students. 1. The practice of painting respirator masks with so-called identification patterns will cease. Masks will be plain and each student will letter his name neatly in letters 1 inch high across the chest and across the shoulders of his outdoor suit. 2. Students are required to wear shirts and shoes or slippers at all times and places except in their own rooms. 3. Pets will no longer be permitted. In some cases where the animals are of interest as scientific specimens, arrangements may be made to feed and care for same in the biological laboratory. 4. Food must not be kept in dormitory rooms. Students receiving food packages from parents will store them with the commissary matron, and reasonable amounts may be withdrawn immediately after meals, except Saturday morning breakfast. Special permission may be obtained for sweet parties during recreation hours on occasions such as birthdays, etc. 5. Students denied weekend privileges for disciplinary reasons may read, study, compose letters, play musical instruments, or listen to music. They are not permitted to play cards, visit other students' rooms, nor leave the school area for any reason. 6. Students wishing to place telephone calls will submit a written request on the approval form and will obtain key to the communications booth at the main office. 7. The student council is dissolved. Student government will be resumed only if and when the behavior of the student body justifies it. Signed, M. Howe, headmaster. Jim whistled. Frank said, "Would you look at that, Jim? Dissolving the student council? Imagine that. Do you suppose we have to get permission to scratch? What does he take us for?" "Search me, Frank. I haven't got a shirt." "Well, I can lend you a sweatshirt until you can buy some. But take a look at a paragraph 3. You'd better get busy." "Huh? What about it?" Jim reread it. "You'd better go butter up the bio teacher so you can make some arrangements for Willis." "What?" Jim simply had not connected the injunction concerning pets with Willis. He did not think of Willis as a pet. "Oh, I can't do that, Frank. He'd be terribly unhappy." "Then you'd better ship him home and let your folks care for him." Jim looked balky. "I won't do it. I won't." "Then what are you going to do?" "I don't know." He thought about it. "I won't do anything about it. I'll just keep him under cover. Howe doesn't even know we've got him." "Well, you might get away with it, so long as nobody snitches on you." "I don't think any of the fellows would do that." They went back to their room and attempted to remove the decorations from their masks. They were not very successful. The paint had bitten into the plastic, and they succeeded only in smearing the colors around. Presently, a student named Smythe stuck his head in the door. "Clean up your masks for you?" "Huh? Can't be done. The colors have soaked in." "You're the umpteenth to find that out. But from the goodness of my heart and a willingness to be of public service, I will paint your mask over to match the original shade, at a quarter credit per mask." "I thought there'd be a catch to it," Jim answered. "Do you want it or don't you? Hurry up, my public is waiting." "Smitty, you could sell tickets to your grandmother's funeral." Jim produced a quarter credit. "That's an idea. How much do you think I could charge?" The other boy produced a can of lacquer and a brush, rapidly painted out Jim's proud design using a pigment that was a fair match for the olive drab original shade. "There, it'll dry in a couple of minutes. How about you, Sutton?" "Okay, bloodsucker," Frank agreed. "Is that any way to talk to your benefactor? I've got a heavy date over at the girls' side, and here I am spending my precious Saturday helping you out." Smythe made equally rapid work of Frank's mask. "Spending your time raising money for your date, you mean," amended Jim. "Smitty, what do you think of these trick rules the new head has made up? Should we knuckle under or make a squawk?" "Squawk? What for?" Smythe gathered up his tools. "There's a brand new business opportunity for each one if only you have the wit to see it. When in doubt, come see Smythe. Special services at all hours." He paused at the door. "Don't mention that deal about tickets to my grandmother's funeral. She'd want a cut in before she kicks off. Granny is a very shrewd gal with a credit." Frank, remarked Jim when Smythe was gone, there is something about that guy I don't like. Frank shrugged. He fixed us up. Let's go check in and get off the punishment list. Right. He reminds me of something Doc used to say. Every law there was ever written opens up a new way to graft. It's not necessarily so. Come on. They found a long line waiting outside the headmaster's office. They were finally ushered in groups of 10. Howe gave their masks a brief glance each, then started in to lecture. I hope that this will be a lesson to you, young gentlemen, not only in neatness but in alertness. Had you noticed what was posted on the bulletin board, you would have been each of you prepared for inspection. As for the dereliction itself, I want you to understand that this lesson far transcends the matter of childish and savage designs that you've been using on your face coverings, offensive as those were. He paused and made sure of their attention. There's actually no reason why colonial manners should be rude and vulgar, and as head of this institution, I intend to see to it that whatever defects there may have been in your home backgrounds, these are repaired. The first purpose, perhaps the only purpose of education, is the building of character, and character can be built only through discipline. I flatter myself that I am exceptionally well prepared to undertake this task. Before coming here, I had 12 years' experience as a master at the Rocky Mountain Military Academy, an exceptionally fine school, a school that produced men. He paused again, either to catch his breath or to let his words soak in. Jim had come in prepared to let a reprimand roll off his back, but the schoolmaster's supercilious attitude, and most especially his suggestion that a colonial home was an inferior sort of environment, had gradually gotten his dander up. He spoke up. Mr. Howe? Hey, yes, what is it? This is not the Rocky Mountains, it's Mars, and this isn't a military academy. There was a brief moment when it seemed as if Mr. Howe's surprise and anger might lead him to some violence or even to apoplexy. After a bit, he contained himself and said through tight lips, What is your name? Marlowe, sir. James Marlowe. It would be a far, far better thing for you, Marlowe, if you were in a military academy. He turned to the others. The rest of you may go. Weekend privileges are restored. Marlowe, remain behind. When the others had left, Howe said, Marlowe, there is nothing in this world more offensive than a smart aleck boy, an ungrateful upstart who doesn't know his place. You are enjoying a fine education through the graciousness of the company. It ill behooves you to make cheap wisecracks at persons appointed by the company to supervise your training and welfare. Do you realize that? Jim said nothing. Harlow said sharply, Come, speak up. Admit your fault and make your apology. Be a man. Jim said nothing. Howe drummed on the desktop. Finally, he said, Very well, go to your room and think it over. You have the weekend to think about it. When Jim got back to his room, Frank looked him up and down and shook his head admiringly. Boy, oh boy, ain't you the reckless one? Well, he needed to be told. He sure did, but what are your plans now? Are you going to cut your throat or just enter a monastery? Old Howie will be gunning for you every minute from here on out. Matter of fact, it won't be any too safe to be your roommate. Confound it, Frank. If that's the way you feel, you're welcome to find another roommate. Easy, easy. I won't run out on you. I'm with you to the end. Smiling, the boy fell dead. I'm glad you told him off. I wouldn't have had the courage to do it myself. Jim threw himself across his bunk. I don't think I can stand this place. I'm not used to being pushed around and sneered at just for nothing, and now I'm going to get it double. What can I do? Darned if I know. This was a nice place under old Stubby. I thought I was going to like it just fine. Stubby was all right, but what can you do, Jim, except shut up and take it and hope he'll forget it? Look, nobody else likes it either. Maybe if we stood together, we could make him slow up. Not likely. You were the only one who had the guts to speak up. Shucks, I didn't even back you up, and I agree with you 100%. Well, suppose we all sent letters to our parents. Frank shook his head. You couldn't get them all to, and some pipsqueak would snitch. Then you would be in the soup for inciting riot or some such nonsense. Anyhow, he went on, just what could you say in a letter that you could put your finger on and prove that Mr. Howe was doing something he had no right to? I know what my old man would say. What would he say? Many's the time he's told me stories about the school he went to back Earthside and what a rough place it was. I think he's a little bit proud of it. If I tell him that Howie won't let us keep cookies in our rooms, he'll just laugh at me. He'd say, Doggone it, Frank, it's not the rule about food in our rooms, it's the whole picture. Sure, sure, I know it, but try to tell my old man. All we can tell is little things like that. It'll have to get a lot worse before you could get our parents to do anything. Frank's views were confirmed as the day wore on. As the news spread, student after student dropped in on them, some to pump Jim's hand for having bearded the headmaster, some merely curious to see the odd character who had had the temerity to buck vested interests. But one two pronged fact became apparent. No one liked the new school head, and all resented some or all of his new disciplinary measures, but no one was anxious to join up in what was assumed to be a foregone lost cause. On Sunday, Frank went out into Syrtis Minor, the terrestrial settlement, not the nearby Martian city. Jim, under what amounted to room arrest, stayed in their room, pretended to study, and talked to Willis. Frank came back at supper time and announced, "I brought you a present." He chucked Jim a tiny package. "You're a pal. What is it?" "Open it and see." It was a new tango recording made in Rio and direct from Earth via the Albert Einstein, titled "Quien es la Señorita?" Jim was inordinately fond of Latin music. Frank had remembered it. "Oh boy!" Jim went to the study desk, threaded the tape into the speaker, and got ready to enjoy it. Frank stopped him. "That's the supper bell. Better wait." Reluctantly, Jim complied, but he came back and played it several times during the evening until Frank insisted that they study. He played it once more just before lights out. The dormitory had been dark and quiet for perhaps 15 minutes when "Quien es la Señorita" started up again. Frank sat up with a start. "What the dickens, Jim? Don't play that now." "I'm not," protested Jim. "It must be Willis. It has to be Willis." "Well, shut him up, choke him, put a pillow over his head." Jim switched on the light. "Willis, boy. Hey, Willis, shut up that racket." Willis probably did not even hear him. He was standing in the middle of the floor, beating time with his eye stalks and barreling on down the groove. His rendition was excellent, complete with marimbas and vocal chorus. Jim picked him up. "Willis, shut up." Willis kept on beating it out. The door burst open and framed Headmaster Howe. "Just as I thought," he said triumphantly. "No consideration for other people's rights and comforts. Shut off that speaker and consider yourself restricted to your room for the next month." Willis kept on playing. Jim tried to hide him with his body. "Didn't you hear my order?" demanded Howe. "I said to shut off that music." He strode over to the study desk and twisted the speaker switch. Since it was already off, all he accomplished was breaking a fingernail. He suppressed an unschoolmasterly expression and stuck the finger in his mouth. Willis worked into the third chorus. Hugh Howe turned round. "How do you have this thing wired?" he snapped. Getting no answer, he stepped up to Jim and said, "What are you hiding?" He shoved Jim aside, looked at Willis with evident disbelief and distaste. "What is that?" Uh, that's Willis," Jim answered miserably, raising his voice to be heard. Howe was not entirely stupid. It gradually penetrated that the music he had been hearing came out of the curious looking fuzzy sphere in front of him. "And what is Willis, may I ask?" "Well, he's a bouncer, a sort of Martian." Willis picked his moment to finish the selection, breathe a liquid contralto "Buenos noches," and shut up for the moment. "A bouncer? I've never heard of one." "Well, not very many have seen one, even among the colonists. They're scarce." "Not scarce enough. Sort of a Martian parrot, I assume?" "Oh, no." "What do you mean, oh, no?" "He's not a bit like a parrot. He talks, he thinks. He's my friend." Howe was over his surprise and recalling the purpose of his visit. "All that is beside the point. You saw my order about pets." "Yes, but Willis is not a pet." "What is he then?" "Well, he can't be a pet. Pets are animals. They're property. Willis isn't property. He's just Willis." Willis picked this time to continue with the next thing he had heard after the last playing of the tango. "Boy, when I hear that music," he remarked in Jim's voice, "I don't even remember that old no good Howe." "I can't forget him," Willis went on in Frank's voice. "I wish I had the nerve to tell him off at the same time you did, Jim. You know what? I think Howe is nuts. I mean, really nuts. I bet he was a coward when he was a kid and it's twisted him inside." Howe turned white. Frank's armchair psychoanalyzing had hit dead center. He raised his hand as if to strike, then dropped it again, uncertain what to strike. Willis hastily withdrew all protuberances and became a smooth ball. I say it's a pet, he said savagely when he regained his voice. He scooped Willis up and headed for the door. Jim started after him. Say, Mr. Howe, you can't take Willis. The headmaster turned. Oh, I can't I? You get back to bed. See me in the office in the morning. If you hurt Willis, you'll what? He paused. Your precious pet won't be hurt. Now you get back in that bed before I thrash you. He turned again and left without stopping to see whether or not his orders had been carried out. Jim stood staring at the closed door, tears streaming down his cheeks, sobs of rage and frustration shaking him. Frank came over and put a hand on him. Jim, Jim, don't take on so. You heard him promise not to hurt Willis. Get back into bed and settle it in the morning. At the very worst, you'll have to send Willis home. Jim shook off his hand. Frank went on. Don't let him get your goat, fella. If he gets you angry, you'll do something silly and then he's got you. I'm already angry. I know you are, and I don't blame you, but you've got to get over it and use your head. He was laying for you. You saw that. No matter what he says or does, you've got to keep cool and outsmart him, or he gets you wrong. I suppose you're right. I know I'm right. That's what Doc would say. Now come to bed. Neither of them got much sleep that night. Toward morning, Jim had a nightmare that Howe was a withdrawn Martian whom he was trying to unroll against his better judgment. There was a brand new notice on the bulletin board at breakfast time. It read, Important Notice. Hereafter, all personal weapons will be kept in the armory at all times. The office of student armorer is abolished. Weapons will be issued by the headmaster and only when the student concerned is leaving the limits of the school and the adjoining settlement. The practice of wearing sidearms in areas where there is no actual danger from Martian fauna will cease. Signed, M. Howe, Headmaster. Jim and Frank read it together. I don't get it, said Jim. Why should he want to take over such a headache, especially since most of us are licensed? All the students usually kept their guns in the armory, but the student armorer had kept check only on the weapons of those students still trying to win their licenses. Frank studied it. You know what I think? No, what? I think he's afraid of you personally. Me? Why? Because of what happened last night. There was murder in your eye, and he saw it. I think he wants to pull your teeth. I don't think he gives a hoot about the rest of us hanging onto our guns. You really think so? Hmm. Maybe it's a good thing our guns don't happen to be in the armory at the moment. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Jim thought about it. I'm not going to give up my gun. Dad wouldn't want me to, I'm sure of that. Anyhow, I'm licensed and I don't have to. I'm a qualified marksman. I've passed the psych tests and I've taken the oath. I'm as much entitled to wear a gun as he is. Okay, I'm with you on that, but we better think up a wrinkle before you have to go see him this morning. The wrinkle showed up at breakfast, the student named Smythe. Frank spoke to Jim about it in a low voice. Together they accosted the student after breakfast and brought him to their room. Look, Smitty, began Jim, you're a man with a lot of angles, aren't you? Could be. What's up? You saw that notice this morning? Sure, who didn't? Everybody's grousing about it. Are you going to turn in your gun? My gun has been in the armory all along. What do I need a gun for around here? I've got a brain. In that case, you won't be called in about your gun. Now, just supposing that you were handed two packages to take care of. You won't open them and you won't know what's in them. Do you think you could find a really safe place to keep them and still be able to give them back on short notice? I don't suppose you want me to tell anybody about these packages? Nope, nobody. Hmm, this sort of service comes high. How high? Well, now, I couldn't afford to do it for less than 2 credits a week. That's too much, Frank put in sharply. Well, you're friends of mine. I'll make you a flat rate of 8 credits for the rest of the year. Too much. 6 credits then, and I won't go lower. You've got to pay for the risk. It's a deal, Jim said before Frank could bargain further. Smythe left with a bundle before Jim reported to the headmaster's office. And we will follow the adventures of Jim and how you cope with a rotten school on Mars next time.